What's going on, wonderful people? Thank you for stopping by. You got Ben, aka Sturkules, here with my week 2 NPDL match. Hoping to bounce back from the loss last week. This week I am playing Connor, aka Super Spider Pig, coach of the Boston Bidoofs. Connor is one of the nicest guys around, and he's a good battler. He's been around the league for a couple seasons, and I think he's really improved every season. I think we've played 3 times before this match before, and every match has been a sweep. As in, when we played in the ULP, which is a Generation 5 battle league, I remember he swept me with a Garchomp, I think 5-0. And then our first time playing in the NPDL, I swept him with my Komodo, which he has a Komodo now, so that's kind of cool. I think it was a 5 or 6-0. And then last year I swept him with a Slurpuff. So it's kind of fun looking at this, looking at his team. He has a lot of threats that can sweep: Necrozma, Komodo, Moxie Crook, Rabombi, Lycanroc, Klinklang. Those are all mons that could absolutely sweep me if I'm not careful. So I'm going to show you my team here in a few, but just looking at his team, Necrozma and Komodo are very hard to guess what they're going to be, as they can both be physical or special attackers, and they can also both be defensive. All 3 of his first mons right here are Stealth Rock setters, and Lycanroc can also set Stealth Rocks, and Rabombi can set Sticky Webs for his team. So Jellicent is a very defensive mon, gets recovery with Recover and Strength Sap. Like I said, Rabombi likes to set the webs, but I would expect that Necrozma or Komodo, one of two, going into this, I would expect one would probably be offensive and one would probably be more defensive with rocks and maybe some more attack options. Crocodile, I absolutely was expecting to be scarfed with a defensive Jellicent, web setting Rabombi, and then I was thinking either Lycanroc or Luxray. And I was thinking there's a chance Klinklang could come, so I did still prep for it. Rapidash and Kangaskhan are good low-tier mons, but I just did not expect them coming with the matchup I've got on my team. One thing to look at is his team's very fast, his lowest speed being 60, which outstrips quite a bit of my team, so didn't expect any Trick Room or anything from Jellicent. Though if he'd ran it, would have been ready, because I got some pretty slow mons on my team, but I figured it would be pretty straightforward. Jellicent and one other defensive, a Scarfer, and then setting some webs for the rest of his team to just clean up. He went pretty hyper offense with this team, and since things like Komodo and Necrozma just have such good natural bulk, he can kind of afford to go hyper offensive because he's still taking some hits. So pretty scary team. But yeah, I expected 6 of these top 8. Klinklang very less likely. So really when it came down to it, was he going to have Lycanroc or Luxray? Let's look at the team builder real quick. So I will go ahead and move my face out of the way so you can see everything. Alrighty. So first thing I brought was Dodger Rabbit, my Cinderace, formerly known as Thugs Bunny, but one of our other coaches in the league has a Diggersby named Thugs Bunny, and I figured, you know what, why have the same name? So I had Pyro Ball, Taunt, Court Change, and U-Turn. So I didn't bring Stealth Rocks this week, thinking that he had 4 options to set rocks that could probably get him up, so I would have rather just switched them to his side, having heavy-duty boots, not taking rocks damage. Same thing if he wanted to get webs up. I wanted to Court Change them over to his side. Taunt was very big for any of his setup mons, anything that wanted to try to Toxic, or if he wanted to set up hazards. Pyro Ball, just stab damage that could hit most of his team, and U-Turn to pivot around. You can see I went with a bulky Cinderace. Initially had max attack and then really started looking at it, and I didn't need max attack for Pyro Ball to hit what it needed to hit, and for most everything else I was taunting or U-turning out. So HP was better, just to take some hits here and there. So speed was speed crept to outspeed everything except for a Bombi. So yeah, pretty straightforward set with what I wanted it to do. It was very much support, very much keeping hazards off my side of the field and keeping him from setting up too awful easily. Next up I had Assault Vest Slowking, which I think is a really fun bring. Assault Vest does keep me from using moves like Teleport or Toxic that are really nice, or Slack Off, or anything like that I want to use on Slowking, but he just had some pretty big special threats. If Rabombi started quiver dancing. If it was quiver dance or even choice specs, I believe I was always eating any 2 hits from this with Slow King, and Regenerator with Assault Vest is cool because I can still get up to a third of my health out back every time I switch out. So Scald Spam was good for everything except Jellicent. Future Sight really put a lot of pressure for him to have to switch things and pivot around, and maybe even trick him into bringing in, what am I trying to think of? Trick him into bringing in Crocodile, if possible, which a Scald could be made prediction there. Fire Blast hit Rabombi hard and hit Kling Kling hard if it came. And then Zap Cannon was kind of the big tech on this. Basically just because Jellicent kind of walled this, and so did Necrozma. And if Necrozma wanted to set it up, I liked the thought of it being paralyzed. Same thing with Jellicent. And since I couldn't actually paralyze them with Thunder Wave because of Assault Vest, this has an 100% chance to paralyze. If it hits, 50% accuracy. More so than anything, this is just fun. You know, sometimes you make good sets, and sometimes you just got to have fun. So, match has already been played, so I'm not going to switch it, but I can already see I messed up. My EVs would have wanted it like this with an odd number at the end. That way you can always switch in onto rocks an extra time. So then I had my special defensive Slow King, physically defensive Wheezing, just meant to take hits, meant to be able to always switch in on Crook, especially if he's choice scarfed. Clear Smog if he tried to set up and takes away those stat changes, does a little bit of damage and helps break Sash, which made it better than Haze, in my opinion. Will-O-Wisp for any physical mon on his team that wanted to start setting up, we could fire that off, and just a little residual on things. Memento gives Terrakion a chance to come in and start setting up. And then Toxic Spikes, which I was weary of, because if I set up Toxic Spikes before I could court change his hazards, then I was putting Toxic Spikes on my side. But it's something I decided to go ahead and stick with because I think the chip on his team was nice. Black Mamba was choice scarfed this week. Draco Meteor was nice. This allowed us to outspeed a Scarf Crook. If his Komodo wanted to set up with either a Dragon Dance or a Cling or a Soul and get up to +1, we could always outspeed and KO with Draco Meteor. Even if he was bulky and had the Omni boost from from Cling or a Soul, since he also loses a significant amount of health, Draco would have still been able to kill. Dark Pulse is nice for Necrozma and Jellicent. Surf for hitting general things like Lycanroc or Crocodile. And then Flamethrower for Rabombi, or if he decided to bring Kling Kling. So we had, who I was hoping could kind of end game here, was Terrakion. Close Combat and Stone Edge, once again, just usually hits things really well. Not amazing on Jellicent, but if I had it whittled down, if I could get a Swords Dance up, I could do some pretty decent damage. The Shookaberry was that I could always take an Earthquake from Crocodile. Whether it was scarfed, it could hit me and I'd live and kill it with Close Combat, or if I knew for a fact that I was faster, I would have been able to set up on it. The Quick Attack was mostly just for if he had some sort of Sash shenanigans going on, but also if I did have a Swords Dance up and some chip on Rabombi, +2 Quick Attack could have knocked it out, which is really cool because Rabombi's a threat. So just generally, Khal Drogo, like usual, trying to come in and hit things hard. And lastly, I had the mascot, Copperajazz, with Ironhead, Play Rough, Power Up, and Earthquake. Just kind of hits his whole team. Ironhead Stab hits a few of his members hard, like Lycanroc and Rabombi. Play Rough hit his Komodo, and because of Choppleberry, we lived any hit, especially any physical hit at +1, and I believe we would have lived an Aura-Sphere at +1 too. Power Whip to help out with Jellicent, and then Earthquake, because if he did bring Kling Kling, Luxray, or Rapidash, we would have been shut down with our top 3 moves. So having Earthquake was just the extra coverage that I never really expected to click, but it was just nice to have. So that's just the team builder and prep I had going into things. Hopefully a quick little rundown, but hopefully also kind of can help understand why I had what I had going into this game. So let's go ahead and hop into the battle. Once again, let me make sure my camera is not being annoying and blocking anything. So there we go. Got this in front of the chat. We do like to chat during the games, but this is mostly just wanting to see the game. So let's go ahead and hop in. Now we've got our leads of Cinderace and Komodo, so I'll go on normal. But from the get-go, let me just go ahead and pause here. I figured he'd either want to get up rocks or he'd want to start setting up, because if he Clanger sold from the get-go, that could be pretty scary. So Taunt was usually a pretty safe play because I'm max HP, could live any hit. So I U-turn when he's not able to Dragon Dance, and I believe he might just double here. No, he goes for Earthquake, so I'm able to take nothing from that with Carl Weezer. Now he brings in Necrozma, which is pretty scary, but I'm able to at least get off a Will-O-Wisp onto this, which is cool because I don't know yet if it's physical or special. So if it's physical, this is very helpful. But I also know I want to get on out of there because he's going to have Psychic Stab to hit me. So I Will-O-Wisp, and we'll go back to normal. So I go ahead and make my switch into Slowking. I'm Assault Vest and can take pretty much any hit. And I see him Autotomize, and I'm like, okay, this is actually a little bit scary. Let me go into Hydreigon because I'm figuring he's not going to have anything to hit me because it doesn't have Signal Beam anymore, and it may have had like Brick Break or something, but I just wasn't thinking about that. But it did have X Scissor, which is actually doing a decent amount. He's faster than me. He's going to be able to get 2 of these off. Thankfully for the burn, we're not taking a whole lot. But doing a Dark Pulse here, normally on a Dark type, that just KOs it, but because of Prism Armor, super effective hits don't do as much. So he's able to pop his Weakness Policy here, which means that X Scissor is absolutely going to be killing here. I don't even think about calking it, and I'm thinking, though, he kind of has to keep the pressure on. I don't think that he can predict here because I can kill it if he tried to go for Photon Geyser on a prediction. So I know I can switch into my Terrakion, take a hit decently well because I'm going to resist that X Scissor, even with it being him being at +2. So I have to reveal my Quick Attack now, but that's better than taking more damage than I want to. So he goes into Crook, gets the Intimidate off, and I'm immediately thinking it's probably a Scarf. So I'm ready to go ahead and double, and I think it still is Scarf, but he makes a good double too, knowing that I'm probably going to be going into Wheezing, right? Easy switch there. So he's got a good matchup with Jellicent, so I go ahead and go back into Slowking, and he's able to taunt me here, which is a very good play. Normally, I don't want to say it was a bad play because I was Assault Vest, but normally what a Slowking or Wheezing are going to want to do, being taunted, is a big hindrance. So normally if I'm wanting to do Toxic or Teleport shenanigans, it's a great play. So he made a good play. For me, I was not put back by him being able to do this, so he's able to Toxic me being faster. I go for a Future Sight, just not sure exactly what he's going to do. So he Strength Saps, whether predicting or just trying to get some health. And I reveal the Zap Cannon, and unfortunately it misses. But I mean, 50% move, what do I expect? I didn't deserve by any means to hit that, but I was hoping it would just because it was going to be so cool. But we go ahead and miss, and I think I go ahead and just try it again. Taunt ended, so he taunts again just to make sure I'm not going to do anything like that. Go for the Zap Cannon again. Miss again. Future Sight does nothing. And at this point, I think, hey, I've got to get back out and get my health back with Regen. So I can pretty safely go into Hydreigon, knowing that he's probably going to taunt or Strength Sap again. And he actually hexes, which I assumed he'd probably have. And a Hex would not have done a whole lot on Assault Vest Slowking, but the toxic damage was really going to start wearing down. So I'm glad I made this play. At this point, I'm thinking, well, we've seen he's leftovers, so can't be Colbur Berry, so doesn't want to take a Dark Pulse, so I'm assuming you switch either into probably Crook or a Bombi, because I think you don't want to switch in Komodo with Draco being a thing. So I go ahead and try to predict with Flamethrower and do nothing to his Jellicent. He made a good play and stayed in. I don't know if he thought I'd double probably, so he goes ahead and taunts again. So now I'm back into Slowking since I've got my health back, and he goes into Crocodile Dundee, which is a great nickname. I go ahead and switch again, back into Wheezing. I can kind of do this every time to see just what he's going to do, and if he ever does knock off even, that won't do the hugest damage. So I double back into Hydreigon, but he doubles. Now he's into Luxray, can fire off a pretty strong Facade onto Carl Weezer, and at this point I am glad I'm Black Sludge because that is going to make it harder for him to take this out, even though Rocky Helmet would have been cool too. I like getting the health back. So at this point, I've got kind of a 50-50. I'm starting to think Rabombi is not webs if he's bringing Luxray in before Rabombi, right? So I'm thinking that might be like Specs or just a Quiver Dance set or something. So I'm thinking at this point, he might not value late game rocks that much, and they might not hurt me that much, so I'm not as worried about court changing. So I could either set up Toxic Spikes here because I don't have rocks up to punish him for being able to switch and keep predicting. So I could either get up Toxic Spikes, or if I think he's going to just try to get me low here, I could click Memento, and then I'm thinking I'll have to force a switch, and I can start setting up with Terrakion earlier than expected and can dent a lot of his team, and if he makes a misplay, could even actually sweep at this point. Not that I was expecting a misplay, but just sometimes if you can get someone frazzled, you can kind of hope for that. But once Terrak gets to +2, it's doing a lot of damage, especially since Jellicent is getting worn down. In fact, I may have been able to just kind of start taking everything out from that point. So I'm thinking if I want to Memento or Toxic Spikes, I go for T-Spikes, and he actually sets up an Agility, which is nice because then I get an extra move, but it's also scary because now he is outspeeding everything. He clicks Facade, and at this point I can go ahead and Memento, and I'm like, hey, you know what? The speed boost isn't that big because his attack is cut in half. I don't think he'll stay in. I think he's switching for sure. He didn't make a misplay here. I expected him to think he needed to switch, but he actually made a good play because with the Guts boost, Superpower was still doing a ton, and he was faster. So he actually made a good play here, and I thought he had to switch. Wasn't really thinking as clearly as he was at this point. He clicks Superpower, does a ton of damage. So I set up Swords Dance, and I'm not feeling too smart right now about this play. Now I'm thinking, he just lowered his defense, and I should have just killed him. But he just made a good play, and I just wasn't really thinking. And I'm thinking about switches I can make, but it's getting very hard, even with its attack being lowered at this point. Switches are getting a little harder because Weezing's gone, and now Caldrogo's weakened down. My Hydreigon's weakened down a little bit. So things are getting a little hard, so I think let's just get Chip with Quick Attack. Terrakion has already picked up a kill, and now it's all but broken off this. So he goes for Wild Charge, very good play, because that's going to do enough, obviously. So now I'm just trying to bait him in to clicking a move that I'm going to be able to go into and resist. So Slowking may have been a better play, because that for sure would have made him click Wild Charge, and I could go into Hydreigon. And because of his attack drops, I know I can always live. But I also kind of wanted to go into Cinderace here and bluff a Sucker Punch, which I actually very much considered bringing, even though it wasn't going to hit things hugely in a situation like this. Sucker Punch would have been cool to have. So I'm kind of bluffing it, but also thinking he's probably clicking Wild Charge here, so I can go into Hydreigon, and I can just always resist this and still live. So he's going to die to his own recoil, so I'm pretty happy with how that went, despite being annoyed at myself for losing Terrakion. So he goes into what I think is probably still his Scarfed Crocodile, and I'm Scarfed as well, so this is kind of both of our moments to scout. So he's probably not 100% sure if I'm Scarfed, or just thinking this is a good time to come in and knock off anything and nothing on my team wants to take a knockoff. And I know that, so at this point I think let's just drop a Draco. If he doubles into Rabombi, just a really good play. But he stays in, just wanting to kill this, so I'm able to get it down to enough health to where it's going to die to Weezing's Poison, which is really nice to have this out of the way. So at this point it's a 3v3. He goes back into Vladimir, his Komodo, which is not taking poison damage because of Lumberry, which is really nice for him. And I'm thinking last time I taunted, and I don't think he's going to... I think he's going to expect that the taunt play is pretty obvious here. So I decide let's just go ahead and pivot out, because I think he's probably going to click Earthquake, which he does. So I'm happy to get Slowking in on this. We don't take too much damage, and now this is pretty much the play that saved the game, because there's a few things I could have done. I could have clicked Future Sight and seen how much it would have done, but I'm starting to think like he's not going to straight up attack. For him, this is a pretty good chance to be able to Dragon Dance up. So I know I want to get Copperajazz in at full health because I've got the Chople Berry. Even a +1 Adamant, close combat, I'm living according to my calc unless I get crit. So I go ahead and just double here into Copperajazz, and I'm very happy to see he Dragon Dances. So that was a scary turn, but at the same time, I just didn't think he'd click Earthquake again. So at this point, he's at +1, and he actually body presses, which I was very much surprised by. I think he had that because he wanted to be defensive, still be able to boost its speed and break. I'm not sure if he knows the body press is not boosted by the Dragon Dance attack because it's off of defense. I'm sure he knew that still. So I was expecting, Drain Punch or Close Combat. So I was happy to see this because this did leave me with more health to be able to kind of hit other things later. So gotta hope it hits the 90% play rough, and it does. Mascot's coming in very clutch. So now he brings in his Jellicent, and here's where you got to kind of play mind games. I figured the Strength Sap was coming, but I kind of want to just see how much his Power Whip's still doing. Does a good amount still, and because of that poison, it's making it a little harder for him to stall. After a certain while, he's going to start getting less and less health back from these, so I can kind of just keep clicking Power Whip and seeing the Toxic stall down. But I'm also aware that I can kind of just go into Slowking and he's not going to get a whole lot left. He makes a pretty good prediction and gets off a Hex here. So I think I considered firing off a Zap Cannon here. But instead I doubled into Cinderace because basically I figured Scald wasn't coming. And actually, no, I'm an idiot. I've seen his whole set and I know he doesn't have Scald. So I'm thinking his best play is probably to either Taunt or Hex in his eyes. So I'm thinking he's probably going to Hex again. So I can switch into Cinderace, and now I can Taunt anything that wants to come in, and then U-turn out. And so it probably looked like I was predicting him to go into Ribombee here. I actually kind of just lucked out with that. Very tempting to click Pyro Ball, but I assume his Jellicent's coming back in, so I go ahead and Taunt, knowing I can live any hit from Ribombee if it stays in. Now I get to U-turn out just for a little bit of chip. That's really not helping near as much as the poison's helping, but get to U-turn, back into Copperajazz, and now we're kind of back playing mind games again. And he just goes for damage on the Cinderace, gets a crit, which makes me a little nervous because I'm, scared I'm going to get crit again and some roll's going to kill me. But I live, I hit the Power Whip, so Mascot was clutch, man. Hit a 90% play rough and 385% Power Whips. Here, I just keep on the pressure, thinking he will choose to kill me. I clicked Iron Head in case he did decide to set up. And now he Bug Buzzes. Based on that damage, I'm realizing now it's a crit. I was saying based on the damage, that must have been Specs or something, because 49% to a max HP Cinderace seemed like a lot to me. But he got the crit, and we kill with Pyro Ball. So we come out with a 2-0. I think near the end, basically once Jellicent went down, obviously always won. But I think I won most scenarios there, but if he would have kept Strength Sapping, it could have kind of kept things going long, and then at that point we would have just had to play a lot of mind games. But the AV Slowking was nice because I knew that it was always living. I think the max even a Specs Ribombee could have ever done was like 45 or something. So I knew this was always living, and probably would have had to hit like a Fire Blast or something, but I was feeling confident towards the end. But I do just want to say, good game to Connor. I really actually feel like that most of the game he outplayed me, at least for the first half. And then things kind of just fell my way towards the end. So it was a good battle. We joked that it was nice to have a close one for once because all of our battles had been sweeps before. So we got to have a close one between us. I'm happy just to get another win to pull it through at 1-1. Something I did just want to say, something I wanted to make my competitive battles was about just teaching anyone who might want to get into Draft League or might want to get into it more than they currently are. So just things to be watching. And the big thing is, I meant to say last week, was watch for opportunities to make double switches. Last week in my loss, I felt like I was making very predictable switches or was clicking very predictable moves. And you'll notice my opponent, Noah, ended up pulling off a win because he pulled off some good double switches. And because of that, was able to, I'm getting a little blurry here, because of that, he was just able to make good plays and pull off a win, and I had opportunities where I should have looked to double, and I didn't. This week, something you can look at is think about making predictions from time to time. So, like for example, starting off, Cinderace versus Komodo at the very start of the game. I didn't know what he was going to click, but to me the smartest thing felt like to predict him to try to set up or get up rocks and to taunt and get out of there. That's just something that gave me momentum at the start of the game. And at times just making the right prediction, thinking about what you think your opponent is going to do based off of what would be smart if you were in their shoes, or on what they've already done. Like, for example, I had taunted Komodo early. Later on in the game, Cinderace versus Komodo are in front of each other again. I didn't want to be predictable right there, and the predictable thing would have been for me to taunt again. And so at that point, I need to think, well, if he's thinking I'll taunt again, he's probably going to go for Earthquake. I was able to predict and get into Slowking, and then you got to kind of predict what are they going to do next. I think he's going to try to set up. Then I was able to get into Copperajazz, and Copperajazz being able to get in, only letting him be at +1 meant I could live any hit, could always revenge kill it with play rough. So looking at times when to make good predictions, and other times just to make when to make a good safe play, right? If you have a dedicated switch, like I knew every time Crick came in, I just wanted to go into Wheezing without really thinking too much about it because it was always going to take hits pretty well. So thinking that through, knowing what your switches are is important. Knowing when to make a safe play and when to predict is important. I've won many games off of good predictions, and I've lost many games because either my opponent made a good prediction or I failed to make one. So that's what I want you to be thinking about this time is when is a good time to make a prediction. You got to weigh the pros and cons. Is it better to just play it safe here? Do we need to be risky? Same thing with